aren't familiar with a birding big year, it's basically where birders go out to a particular area and try and record as many species as possible within a calendar year. That could be, it could be their local patch, it could be a reserve, it could be a county or state list, province, country, continent, and even global endeavours have been attempted. So depending on the size of the area that you're birding, depends on the expectation of how many species you're going to see. Now, my big year was for the United Kingdom, for the UK. So in a normal year, if you were to get out into the main habitat types, during the different seasons, getting into some of the variety of different regions, so you would be counting resident birds and African migrants. You'd be counting passage birds. This is birds that move through the UK during spring and autumn. They're sort of as a staging post, they're refueling on their route to wherever they're going. And of course the influx of wildfowl during the winter, including geese and ducks, but also things like finches and thrushes. So you'd be looking at approximately 200 species. If you saw 200 species in a year here in the UK, I'm sure that equated to a very good year. I tend to see anywhere between 140 and 160 species. I have seen up to, I think it was 2015 or 16, I saw 196 species. But I've never really looked at the numbers that much. I probably look at them, I've started to look at them more because I'm contributing all of my records to ebird now. But I've never, really looked at it as a challenge. If you want to do a big year here in the UK, and that is chasing rarities from January to December, then the number to go for, the benchmark number, is 300. Now, to achieve this, having attempted it last year, I would say to anyone thinking about it, you're going to need, on a very basic level, time, money, good information, transportation, a lot of energy, a fair amount of luck, and I would say a complete disregard to common sense. Because if you had any common sense whatsoever, you wouldn't be chasing half of the birds you're going to have to. And, unfortunately, the nature is that for, a percentage of the birds that you're going to chase, you will miss a few. That's just, the odds aren't really stacked in our favour when we're twitching rarities. And it's, it does sting a little bit more if you've driven 5 hours one way to see a bird that hasn't shown up in the UK for 10 years and miss it, versus driving 20 minutes down the road and missing a bird that turns up annually, and you'll probably get it that same year anyway. So you need stamina when that happens, because you will doubt your own sanity in doing that. The year actually started off in Norfolk on the 1st of January. We were in Norfolk anyway, finishing off the 2021 year. When I say we, that is Jacqueline Avenel and I. Jacqueline was my sort of co-pilot and partner during this whole campaign, came out on most of the trips with me, which was brilliant. But we were there finishing off our 2021 year, which I think ended off with 165 species. And so I birded Titchwell RSPB reserve. and that's on the Norfolk coast. It is a very famous RSPB reserve, as is the county that it sits in. Norfolk is very much steeped in our birding history here in the UK. It's sort of hallowed ground. Many birders will make annual pilgrimages to Norfolk. For myself, I tend to end up there anywhere between 1 and 4 or 5 times in a year. It's a fantastic county to birding. I've never had a bad year. And it doesn't matter what season you go to Norfolk, you're always going to see something, always. So a great place to kick-start off the year. But like I said, it hadn't manifested itself as me trying to break any record or trying to beat my own record, should I say, until a little bit later on. So we had a great day at Titchwell. I think we ended up something like 56 species, long-tailed duck, goldeneye were a couple of good birds got that day, as were these wonderful European golden plover, about 300 there circling around, which was quite nice to see. But yeah, it was a great way to start the day. And as the weeks went on, I got things like goshawk and hawfinch, not particularly mega rare birds, but birds that you wouldn't, you don't necessarily find when you actually go looking for them. They're sometimes birds that turn up when you're out anyway. So I added a few things like that, and then a trip to Minsmere, another very famous RSPB reserve. This time a little further south in Suffolk, and here we got some lovely looks at red-throated diver, which were wintering on the sea there, and then we came across this lovely flock of bearded tits. Usually these are heard, frustratingly for the photographers and birders who are looking for them, pinging through the reed beds, their little pinging call. But fortunately we were able to see these birds quite close as they were feeding. They weren't bothered by us at all. The males with their wonderful moustachial stripe, which is out, really stands out. And as you can see, got a little bit of video footage too. We also picked up some whooper swan there. I think these are possibly the birds from Iceland that are actually overwintering here from that population. So the first bird that really got twitched was a bird that should be in the mountains of Asia. It is a Hume's leaf warbler. This bird was found down in Eastbourne, and when I went down there, I didn't actually get any photographs, unfortunately. I got a little bit of audio. This particular bird here was a Hume's leaf warbler that I photographed maybe 2-3 weeks ago, but I thought I'd just put it up there so at least you've got an idea of what it looked like. So that was a lifer for me. And while I was there, I met a guy, and he told me about a hooded crow that was at Polegate Services, which was like a service station on my way back home. And I mean, these are birds that are normally found north of the Great Locks in Scotland. So I thought I'd give it a go. I pulled up to McDonald's, couldn't see the bird, grabbed myself a burger, was sat outside, looked up, and there was this hooded crow set up on a pole. So that was a wonderful bird to get, especially down here in the southern parts. Next bird that we twitched was a Penduline Tit, a bird that you can see breeding in Spain and further east. Here's an example. This is actually a picture of a Penduline Tit nest and bird I found out in Spain when I did a bit of a birding trip out there. But these birds here were at a reed bed in Weston-super-Mare in Somerset, and though it was a very windy and cold and it was a little spitting with rain, we managed to get these, get some footage of this lovely little bird. Finally, for our sort of winter campaign in terms of rare birds, we got a North American mega. Having spent 13 years living out in Canada, I'm very familiar with this bird and see it hopping around in my garden out there. And of course, but here, in England, it is an absolute mega rarity. And this was it was sort of in these fields behind this like little cul-de-sac on this suburban area near Eastbourne, just outside. And we got there and we managed to see it, and it put on a little display and was feeding on like some looking for earthworms or something on a little bit of grass behind these carriages. So absolutely fantastic bird. And so this is what I would call the first part of the winter campaign, and that's exactly what I'm going to do with each season now, is just walk through the highlights of each season with you, pointing out, sometimes the more pedigree, rarer birds, but also including some of the birds that I've seen along the way, because they all make up the tapestry of that year. And I think it would be terrible not to include some of the birds that are just fantastic to see, regardless of their rare status. So here we have Little Owl. This was at Elmley Reserve in Kent, hanging out on I think it was an old schoolhouse or something, and it's breeding out there using these old ruins, and as you can see, blending in very well. Wonderful bird to see, quite diurnal, the Little Owl. And at the same reserve, here is a short-eared owl. Now, it took some effort to see this bird. I think this was our third trip down to Elmley. On our first trip, we didn't manage to see any of the short-eared owls that were wintering there. I believe that they believe that they're Scandinavian birds overwintering here, and there was probably about, I think there was something between 6 and 9 short-eareds roosting in this particular area, but you just couldn't see them, and unfortunately you have to be off the reserve at a certain time, and it just so happens that sometimes that is the time the actual birds show, so it's a little bit frustrating, to be quite honest. The second time we went down there, we actually saw a bird hunkered down, just about see its face in the grass. And then here, on our third attempt, we waited till literally kicking out time, and the birds came out of roost, and we watched them flying around, which was fantastic, but I didn't get a chance to get any photographs. And as we were pulling out of the reserve, I was looking at a curlew, and I was sort of saying to Jacqueline, oh, there's another curlew over there. And she said, that's not a curlew, Rich. That's a short-eared owl. And I looked over, and there it was, this short-eared owl just sat in the grass, and sat there for a while, so we managed to get a photo or two. So as expected, the spring was an outstanding period of time during this campaign, not only with the return of the African migrants and passage birds, but also we had a fantastic trip to Wales. There was a big day birding challenge set up through the Cornell Lab for Ornithology and ebird, which was fantastic, and a great sprinkling of rarities, so quite a lot to get through. I'm actually going to start off with sharing with you some of our breeding birds here to get us underway, get a feel of what spring's like. Here we have Avocet, very much a flagship species actually, Avocet. They were extinct from around the time of Queen Victoria up till the end of the Second World War, where flood defences created some favourable breeding habitat, and the birds returned to the UK in 1947, breeding at Minsmere, and have been doing very well ever since. These birds are actually down at Brook's RSPB reserve, and it was wonderful to watch them doing their changing of their nest duties. So next up we have Blackcap. Blackcaps are Sylvia warblers. Their fruity melody, their song bursting from the hedgerows during spring really does fill your heart, as you can hear in the background here. Pretty much named after the male with his black cap. Females have a brown cap, as do the juveniles in both sexes. Quite an interesting bird. Ever since the 60s, it's been noted that some of these birds have been overwintering here in the UK. And I think initially the thoughts were that these birds were possibly British breeding birds that had not then migrated. But through ringing studies over the years, we've learnt that a huge amount of these birds are from a population in Germany that seem to be changing their strategy for migration. Instead of moving down to places like Spain, they're actually moving here into the UK. For what reason, I'm not sure. I mean, often they're recorded at bird feeding stations, so maybe because of the amount of bird feed that we use here in the UK. This is something they've found an easy food source, but lots of interesting things going on with this species. Next we have corn bunting, very much associated with farmland and agricultural areas. It's a little brown job, an LBJ. You could say possibly nondescript, but very distinctive in their song, this jingling key song that they have, and the way they often sit up on top of bushes or trees or on overhead wires during the spring singing their song. Next here we have European cuckoo, a wonderful bird. The sound of the cuckoo in the spring always reminds me of my childhood, probably because playing out in the fields when we were kids we would hear the cuckoo and the sound of church bells, funny enough, in our village. The cuckoo is a brood parasite, which means that it lays its eggs in the nests of other birds. Primarily here the European cuckoo's hosts include dunnock, meadow pipit and reed warbler. This bird was seen down at Thursley Common in Surrey. So this was our view en route to Walthamstow Marshes in East London. We were actually chasing a bird called a dusky warbler, and but unfortunately we dipped on that bird, but we did find lots of other birds there. It was quite an interesting area to bird here, and actually on our way back to the car we noticed a couple of Mistle Thrush out in some paddocks, and watched them for a while, and watched that they went up to this particular tree a couple of times, and we found the nest and watched the adults feeding the young. Here we're looking out from Martin's Haven in Wales. Our original plan was to go on the boat over to Skoma to get up close and personal with the seabirds there, but unfortunately, though the weather was nice, the seas were a little bit swelly and rough and we were unable to take the trip. So we did a lot of our scanning from the cliffs there, managed to see most of the regular seabirds such as fulmar, kittiwake, razorbill, guillemot, Atlantic puffin, gannet, things like that. but we also got rock pipit, peregrine falcon, and here we've got this wonderful smart looking northern wheatear in breeding plumage, which was lovely to see. And not far from there we got our first views of red-billed chough. This is a member of the crow family, differing with its very red curved bill and red legs and feet. They're very much restricted to the west coast at the moment, quite abundant on the west coast of Wales. They're doing quite well. There are smaller populations in places like Scotland. They're also in the Isle of Man, Northern Ireland, and I believe that there's a small population down in Cornwall. So from here we headed east about 2 hours on our way to Gwenferrid Dinas RSPB reserve. Now at this reserve, it's a fantastic place with a wonderful alder and oak woodland, and then this is surrounded by these beautiful hillsides and this lovely river running through the reserve. Here you would hope to see things like grey, wagtail, dipper, goosander and kingfisher, and above the bluff behind raven, possibly peregrine or red kite or buzzard. But actually in the woods themselves they hold some wonderful migrants. And the first one we look at here, this is pied flycatcher. It is a cavity nester, so takes advantage of the nest boxes that are put up in these woods, and very good for us birders as well, because the dappled light in there is absolutely wonderful, and these birds often stay close to their nest boxes, so a little bit of time spent there at the right time of year and you'll get some absolutely fantastic views of this bird, as you will do also with another African migrant and very smart looking male here. This is common redstart, another bird that takes advantage of these cavities. And of course out on the woods, I've got no photo, but I did hear one wood warbler, which is a fantastic bird to hear and see. A little further up the road out of the reserve is an area of outstanding beauty. It's very panoramic and you could spend an hour or 2 hours on this road poking around. You rarely bump into another car, and if you do you can just sort of pull over and squeeze past each other and you pretty much get the place to yourself and enjoy that, looking for different sort of heath and birds. But here on 2 occasions I've managed to find this very wonderful Whinchat, a bird that I'm really actually used to seeing in the autumn and not on its breeding ground, so that's wonderful to see. From here we headed north, stopping at a couple of osprey viewing areas where they're breeding. The birds were actually on eggs at the time, so there wasn't a lot going on. It wasn't like they were feeding chicks or anything, so we had stationary birds for the most part, but still wonderful to see this incredible bird. From there we headed to the chocolate box quintessential village of Beth Gallet in the Snowdonia National Park, and enjoyed a very well deserved pint. In the stream that ran through the village we saw goosander and grey wagtail, but just outside of the village we were very fortunate to connect with this fantastic bird here. This is white-throated dipper, and one of my most wanted birds to see on this trip. Back into the southeast of England now, and a 4 a.m. alarm call preceded some 18 hours of birding and 225 miles of driving as I connected with my last bird and 100th bird of the day, European nightjar. my participation in the Big Day Challenge was over, and that effort also included 11 miles of walking over 6 amazing reserves that spanned 3 counties here in the southeast of England. That was Surrey, Sussex and Kent. I managed to raise £200 for the Vulture Conservation Foundation, and that was my chosen charity for this event. It was a fabulous day, many highlights. So first of all, I'd like to share with you one of the birds that I saw on that day, one of my favourite birds here on the heathland. This is Dartford Warbler. Dartford Warblers didn't do very well back when I was a kid. They were a very rare bird. I think cold winters and egg collecting had a very negative impact on them. But since those days, they've done quite well with habitat management over here. And again, they do suffer if we have harsh winters, because they don't migrate, these birds. They are resident. But they're a very skulky bird. Often, frustrating birders and photographers alike, as they dart from one bush to the other, not giving you much opportunity. But every now and then they will sit up and sing and put on a bit of a show, and it's always worth the wait. So what I'm going to do now is just share with you 2 or 3 videos from my Big Day Birding Challenge, just so you get a little bit of a taste of what that was like. Good morning. Global Big Day is here, down at Papercut Water Meadows. Got Cuckoo calling in the background. There are quite a few birds so far: Blackcap, whitethroats, reed warbler. Beautiful day. Global Big Day Challenge. Here we go. This is all in hope that I can raise some money for the Vulture Conservation Foundation. I really do. I mean, I know many charities are worthy, of course. Everyone can only do so much. I'm like that myself. You can't give to every charity, but I'm hoping that a few of you out there can maybe miss out on a coffee and put a little donation in there to help. I do think it is worth looking after these incredible birds, because they've had a really hard time, to be honest. So anyway, I'm now at the sea. I'll carry on birding. Right, hi. I'm out on Chough Common doing the last of my Big Day challenge, and I've had 2 roding woodcock. Oh. Nightjar has just flown past me. Nightjar has just flown past me. I hope that comes out in the video. They're 2 roding woodcock. They look like a giant snipe, big long bill. They do this territorial flight called roding. And I had a churring nightjar, which is like an African migrant, also known as goat suckers. They're crepuscular feeders. They hunt at dusk and dawn, and very, very secretive. They do this thing called churring. They churr. You probably can't hear that, but it's churring again. And when it just flew past, they often do that like high-pitched call and a wing clap. Anyway, what a way to finish off an incredible day. Okay, so let's get into some of the more rarer birds that were seen during that time. This is white-tailed lapwing, a bird that breeds out in the Middle East, Iran and Iraq, and also up into Russia. Now, the Middle Eastern birds tend to be more resident and stay put during the winter, whereas the Russian birds will push south. They'll go into the Middle East, or they go down to the Indian subcontinent, or and even into East Africa. Now this bird I twitched in 2021 originally. It was at Blackcap Sands in Yorkshire, and during 2022 it actually moved down. It moved south down to Frampton Marshes in Lincolnshire. So we headed there, and as you can see, we got some lovely looks at this bird. In fact, this second sitting produced a better look than the one at Blackcap, to be honest. So wonderful bird to see. Anyway, it was here that we had another decision to make. A North American mega had turned up previously. I was unable to chase this bird because of life commitment, etc. And so had to sit back frustratingly, and as more and more people got to go down and go for this bird. However, it certainly gave me a little bit of anxiety anyway, because watching the pattern of this bird and its behaviour, it left me feeling very unconfident, because it would be there for an hour and gone for a day, and then it would be seen maybe 3 or 4 times during a day, and then it would be gone for 2 days. And so it sort of felt like a bit of a risky twitch. But because we were part way up country, we decided that, you know what, we're just going to go for it and hope for the best. And so that's what we did. We headed from Lincolnshire to Lancashire that day, and en route to hopefully see this wonderful belted kingfisher. The next morning we were up on site at 7 o'clock, and a short walk across the field to the viewing area, and it wasn't too long until we heard the bird come calling its rattling call down the river, and we were able to watch it for a little while as it fished and changed posts. It was at distance, so we weren't able to get fantastic photos, but we did get this and a little bit of video, which hopefully will make up for it. Next came a blue-winged teal at Marlow Lowgrounds in Buckinghamshire. This is a North American rarity, but fairly annual here in the UK, but lovely to see, and a British tick for me. And then on the same day we headed up to Otmore RSPB Reserve in Oxfordshire, I believe we were looking for a gargany, but we stumbled upon this white stork, which was a lovely bird to see. At Dungeness in Kent, we had a black kite showing well over the reserve for a little time whilst we were down there. And then came great reed warbler, a bird that I've seen. The first time I saw it was in Greece about over 20 years ago. I was on a ringing expedition with the Hellenic Ornithological Society on the island of Antikythera in the Aegean, and we trapped a few of these wonderful birds, and that really was my introduction to great reed warbler, and very spoilt I was as well. And then the next time I saw this was down in Spain on a trip that I'll cover on another talk. So this was my first British great reed warbler. There was, I think, either 2 or 3, I think minimum of 2, but maybe 3 birds were reported in Norfolk, and this bird was on the Stettishan coastal path. Anyway, as you can see, we got the bird, and I apologise for the horrendous wind in the background. I just sort of got a bit of audio recorded with my iPhone. But yeah, great bird to see. And then next came a mega, Eleonora's Falcon. It's not a mega in that it's never been seen before. It's been actually recorded and seen on quite a few different occasions here in the UK. What made it very special is this is the first twitchable Eleonora's Falcon in the UK. All the others were seen by sort of, a few observers, and then the bird was gone. And documented or photographed. But this bird hung around for a bit, and which gave lots of very happy people from all over the UK a chance to connect with this absolutely magnificent creature. They're a very interesting bird for a falcon. There's 3 points I'd like to make about this bird. Firstly, they're a colonial breeder. So when I was talking to you about this ringing trip I did out in Greece and had the great reed warbler, during that trip we had a very windy day and we closed the nets and decided to go for a walk, and we actually walked to the cliffs where the breeding colony of Eleonora's falcon were, and they had just recently arrived back at the breeding cliffs and were going through sort of these head bobbing courtship displays, which was absolutely fascinating to watch. So they're a colonial nest of these falcons, and they can breed in close proximity without conflict, and they actually breed later in the season to harvest the sort of southern movement of hatched passerines that are on their migrating back. So they're feeding their young on the young of the birds that have already fledged the nest. So it's quite a good strategy. The other interesting thing about this bird is that they actually winter. The whole population winters in Madagascar. So yeah, quite interesting in its tactics and behaviour, this bird. Another thing that happened when we were there, while we were observing this absolutely fantastic bird, there was another bird there, a red-footed falcon, and another, fantastic bird here for the UK. And it was sort of really unheard of. You're looking in one direction, you're looking at Eleonora's falcon, and you literally turn around, on the wire behind you is a red-footed falcon. And of course, in between this, we had hobbies hunting insects in front of us. So it was a very, very special day and a fantastic bird, and made lots of people very, very happy. So that was the culmination of my spring effort. It ended up with me being on 188 species, so I was definitely feeling good about getting past the 200 mark now, and very much looking forward to summer.